She was standing outside his gate in the rain, 63 years old, worn shoes, a faded photograph pressed against her chest, and inside that compound, through the iron bars, she could see the lights blazing, hear the laughter rising, smell the food she would never be invited to eat. She had sold her land for him. She had sold her shop. She had sold her wedding ring, the last thing she had of the man she loved, just to give her son a chance at life. And now, he was home, wealthy, celebrated, surrounded by people who didn't know his name 5 years ago. He saw her at the gate. He looked directly at her, and he turned away. Her name was Ades. And what happened next? Nobody in that town ever forgot. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let's get into this story. To understand what happened at that gate, you have to go back. You have to go all the way back to a small town called Umuna, tucked between dusty roads and green farmland in the southeastern part of Nigeria, where everybody knew everybody's business, and pride was something people wore like clothing. Ades Okafor had lived in Umuna her entire life. She was not a complicated woman. She didn't ask for much: a clean home, enough to eat, people she loved nearby. That was it. That was the whole list. She had married Chukwuemeka Okafor at 22, a quiet, hard-working man who fixed motorcycles for a living and made her laugh every single evening without fail. They had one child together, a boy. They named him Tobena, which in their language meant father's heart, because from the moment he was born, that boy carried both of their hearts inside him without even trying. Chukwuemeka died when Tobena was 7, a brief illness that moved fast and left no room for goodbyes. One week he was eating dinner with his family. 3 weeks later, he was gone. And Adaiza, just 29 years old, was suddenly alone in a world that was not designed for women, without husbands and without money. She didn't collapse. That was the thing about Adaiza. She didn't collapse. She opened a small market stall selling peppers, tomatoes, and dried fish. She sewed clothing at night by the light of a kerosene lamp when Tobena was asleep. She planted a small garden behind the house. She did everything. She did all of it alone. And she made sure that her son never once felt the full weight of what she was carrying. Every morning she woke him up with the same words: "My miracle. Time to rise." Tobena grew up knowing his mother's hands were never idle. He grew up watching her move through exhaustion like it was just weather, something that came and went, but never stopped her. And so he studied. He studied with everything he had, because he understood without being told that his education was the thing she was working for. It was the whole point. He was brilliant. His teachers said it plainly without dressing it up. This boy is gifted. He won competitions. He came first in his class year after year. And when he was 17, he sat a scholarship examination for a university in Lagos and passed it so completely that even the examiners called to confirm he was real. "Mama," he said, the evening the letter came, holding it with 2 hands like it might disappear. "I passed." Adais looked at the letter for a long time. Then she looked at her son. Then she sat down on the wooden chair by the door and pressed both palms over her mouth and cried. Not sad crying, the other kind, the kind that comes when something you sacrificed for finally arrives. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We did it," he corrected her. She pointed at him. "Don't let it go to your head." He laughed, and she laughed. And for that one evening, everything in the world felt exactly right. University led to more doors opening. Tobena graduated with honors in engineering. He secured a postgraduate opportunity in the United Kingdom, then transferred to a program in the United States. With each move, Daisy sold something. Her late husband's farmland went first. 4 acres that Chukwuemeka had planned to build on. Then the market stall. Then her sewing machine. Then, piece by piece, thing by thing, she dismantled everything she had built to fuel everything her son was becoming. At the airport, the day Tobena left for America, Daisy pressed a small envelope into his jacket pocket. "Mama, I can't take this," he said, when he felt the weight of it. "It's mine to give," she said simply. "Take it." He looked at her for a moment, this small woman who somehow contained so much. And then he pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than either of them expected. "I will build you a house so big," he whispered, "you will never worry again. I promise you that." She pulled back and looked at his face. "I don't need a big house. I just need you to come back." The plane lifted. She watched it until it disappeared. And then she walked back to her near-empty home and started figuring out how to survive on almost nothing, because the alternative was letting her son fail, and that was not a thing she was willing to consider. The first 2 years, Tobena called every Sunday without exception. Sometimes they talked for an hour, sometimes longer. He told her about the cold weather, about the food that never tasted right, about professors who spoke so fast he had to replay lectures 3 times to understand. She told him about the neighbors, about the mango tree that was finally fruiting, about the pastor's new car that everyone was talking about. Those calls were everything to her. She planned her week around them. Then the calls shifted. Once a week became every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks became once a month. She told herself it was fine. She told herself he was busy, that building a life in a foreign country took everything a person had, that she should be patient. "He's working," she told her neighbor, a sharp-tongued woman named Chidinma, who had her own opinions about sons who disappeared. "You don't understand how hard it is over there." "I understand how hard it is here," Chidinma said. Alone. Days ignored her, but inside the house at night, when there was nothing to distract her, she sat with the silence and felt it pressing in from all sides. He stopped sending money after the 3rd year. There were explanations at first, a delay with the bank, an issue with the transfer. He would sort it by next week. And then the explanation stopped too. And then came the silence, months of it. Then longer. She wrote him a letter. No response. She called the number she had. It rang and rang. She contacted a distant cousin who had a son in the same city. The cousin's son said he would try to reach him. No news came back, and still she defended him. Something must have happened, she told people who asked. My son would not just disappear. Something happened. Something had happened, but not what she imagined. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning. Adise was sweeping her front yard when Chidinma came through the gate with the look of someone carrying news they couldn't wait to put down. "He's back," Chidinma said. Adise stopped sweeping. "What?" Tobena. "He's back in town. Since yesterday." Chidinma watched her face carefully. "He's staying at the Adaora compound on the other side of town. They say he built something there. A big place." The broom handle went still in Adise's hands. "He's been in town since yesterday." Chidinma said nothing, because nothing was the correct answer. That afternoon, Adise dressed in her best wrapper, combed her hair carefully, and walked to the Adaora side of town. It was a 40-minute walk. She made it without stopping. When she arrived, she understood immediately. The compound was enormous. Fresh paint. A black iron gate with an intercom system. 2 cars parked inside. Through the gate, she could see people moving, hear voices, hear music. A celebration of some kind. A gathering of important people welcoming back an important man. She pressed the intercom. No one answered. She stood at the gate and waited. After some time, a gate man came out and looked at her through the bars. "Who are you looking for?" "My son," she said clearly. "Tobena Okafor. I am his mother." The gateman disappeared. Several minutes passed. Then she saw him. He came around the corner of the house casually, dressed well, looking prosperous. He had a drink in his hand. He was laughing at something someone had said behind him. He walked toward the gate the way someone walks when they expect to deal with a minor inconvenience. Then he saw her face. The laughter stopped. For a moment, just a moment, something moved across his expression. Something complicated. Something that had guilt inside it, and something else she couldn't name. She waited for him to open the gate. He stood there. Then he turned around and walked back into the house. Just like that. No words. No greeting. No acknowledgement that she existed. Adaeze stood at that gate for another hour. The photograph she had carried in her bag, the one of young Tobena holding her hand outside their house. She held it against her chest and stood there in the evening air while the sounds of celebration drifted over the wall. Then she turned and walked home. That night, she stopped defending him. She didn't make a scene. That was the thing that broke people's hearts most when they found out later. She didn't go back to the gate screaming. She didn't spread his name through the town. She didn't tell the story to anyone. She simply came home, put the photograph on the table, sat down, and went quiet in a way she had never gone quiet before. The market stall she had recently reopened, a small one, mostly to give herself something to do. She stopped going. She stopped visiting the church women's group. She stopped answering when Chidinma knocked. The town, of course, talked. A town like Umuna was not a place where secrets survived long. People had seen her walk to that compound. People had seen her walk back alone. The story moved from mouth to mouth with additions and interpretations and moral judgments attached. At Tobena's compound, life continued as if nothing had occurred. He was seen driving into town. He attended events. He gave a donation to the local school, which a community leader publicly praised. His wife, a beautiful woman named Shalawa, elegant and quiet, was seen once at the market with 2 assistants carrying her bags. Someone said to Shalawa directly, not knowing how to pretend otherwise, "His mother lives just across town, you know, the woman who sold everything for him." Shalawa looked at the woman for a moment. Then she looked at the ground. And she said nothing. But her eyes said something. Something heavy and uncomfortable. At the church one Sunday, the pastor spoke about honor. About the commandment to honor your father and mother. 3/4 of the congregation glanced in the direction of Tobena's cousins who were present. Nobody said the name out loud. Nobody needed to. Meanwhile, at Adaeze's house, the walls were growing closer. A man came to the door one afternoon, a representative from a financial institution. He had documents. He spoke calmly in the manner of people who deliver terrible news regularly and no longer feel it. He explained that a loan had been taken years ago, a substantial loan, using her property as collateral. The payments were not being made. If the matter was not resolved, the property would be seized. Adaeze stared at him. "I took no loan," she said. "The documents carry your name and signature, Ma." She had never seen the documents in her life. She sat alone that night with this information and tried to put together what it meant. Someone had used her name. Someone had forged her signature and taken money in her name, and now that money was unpaid, and they were going to take her home. Her last thing. The one thing she hadn't sold. She didn't know who had done it. She didn't know when. She didn't have money for a lawyer. She didn't have a son she could call. She simply sat with it. And still, she did not go back to that gate. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section, because what's coming next is going to change everything you thought you knew about this story. The letter arrived on a Thursday, It was thin, international postage, a hospital address in Houston, Texas, printed in the top left corner. It was addressed to Adaiz Okafor in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it slowly. It was not from Tabena, it was from a doctor. A Dr. Marcus Webb. He wrote that he was reaching out on behalf of a situation involving her son that he believed she should be aware of. He wrote carefully, in the measured way of someone trying to respect privacy, while also correcting a serious wrong. He wrote that several years ago, Tabena had come to his clinic in a state of severe financial and psychological distress, that he had accumulated devastating debt through an investment that collapsed, that he had lost almost everything, that for a period he had been homeless, that the shame of it, particularly the shame of having failed his mother after everything she had sacrificed, had broken him in a way that took years of treatment to begin to address. He wrote that Tabena had eventually recovered some stability after meeting and marrying Shalewa, whose family was financially comfortable. That returning to Nigeria had been, for Tabena, an attempt to start over. But that the shame had not gone away. It had calcified into something worse, a belief that if he faced his mother, she would see his failure, and that he would rather disappear from her life entirely than let her look at him and find a man who had wasted everything she gave. And then there was the second part. The doctor wrote that in the months after Tabena lost everything, someone had contacted him, a distant relative, a man named Ekene, who had known the family for years. Ekene had told Tabena that Adaize had secretly taken a large loan against her property without telling him, that she had received significant money she had never disclosed, and that the reason she never told him was that she had given it to a younger man she had been seeing and was now hiding the debt from everyone. Tabena had believed this. In his darkest period, alone and broke and humiliated, he had received this story, and it had landed in him like a stone. His mother, the person he had built his entire life's meaning around, had, in his mind, hidden money from him while he was suffering abroad. It had not made him hate her. It had made him feel that everything he understood about trust was a lie. It had made it impossible to face her. Ekene, it turned out, was the one who had taken the loan. He had forged Adaize's signature. He had invented the story about the younger man to poison the relationship before Tabena could come home and discover the truth. The doctor had written the letter because Tabena had finally told him everything. Because Tabena was now trying to find the courage to come home, really come home. And the doctor felt that perhaps Adaize deserved to understand what had happened before that moment arrived. At the bottom of the letter, there was a handwritten note in different handwriting. Just 2 lines. She recognized it. I believed something terrible about you. I am sorry. I am coming. Adaize read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully. Then she sat at her table with the photograph in front of her and the letter beside it, and the silence of her near-empty house all around her, and she let herself understand the shape of what had happened. 2 people, each believing the other had betrayed them, each retreating behind pride and pain and the story someone wicked had planted between them. 20 years of distance, 20 years of her defending him, then grieving him, then losing him without a funeral. And the whole thing had been a lie. She did not cry right away. She sat with it first. She let it become real. Then she picked up a pen and a sheet of paper, and she wrote something. She placed it on the table beside the photograph. Then she lay down because she was very, very tired. She had been tired for a long time. There was something in her chest that the doctors in the small clinic she occasionally visited had been watching with concern. She had not told anyone. She had not wanted to be a burden on people who owed her nothing. She hadn't told her son because she had no son to tell. She closed her eyes. He came that same evening. Tabena had received a phone call from Dr. Webb, who had told him the letter had been sent. He drove to the house across town, his mother's house, the house he had not stepped inside in all the weeks he had been back. He drove fast. He didn't think about what he would say. There was nothing in him organized enough to be called a plan. There was only the terrible urgency of someone who has waited too long and just realized it. The front gate was unlocked. He pushed it open. The yard was neat but small. The paint on the walls was faded. The mango tree he remembered as a child was still there, older now and heavy. The front door was open. He stepped inside. "Mama?" Silence. The house was almost empty. Not the emptiness of someone who had moved out. The emptiness of someone who had, over the years, sold piece by piece everything that could be sold. The sofa was old. The shelves were bare in places where things had clearly once stood. He walked into the main room. She was on the bed, eyes closed, breathing, sleeping, or something near it. On the table, the letter from Dr. Webb, still folded, and beside it, a photograph he recognized. Him and her, outside this very house, when he was 7 years old, and she was the largest thing in the world. And beside the photograph, a small piece of paper with her handwriting on it. He picked it up. "I never needed your mansion. I only needed my son." He stood in the center of that small room with those words in his hand, and every wall he had built inside himself over the past decade. Every wall made of shame and pride and misdirected anger and the particular cruelty of believing the wrong thing about someone you love. Every single wall came down at the same time. He sat on the floor beside her bed. He did not try to speak. He did not wake her. He simply sat there, his back against the bed frame, the note in his hand, while everything, he had become unraveled quietly in that small room that smelled of her, of palm oil and camphor, and something floral he could not name, but had always associated with the word home. He stayed there through the night. In the morning, she stirred. She turned her head and saw him sitting there, awake, red-eyed, looking at her with an expression she had not seen on his face since he was a child. She looked at him for a long moment. "Tabena," she said softly. "Mama." His voice was not steady. "You came home." He reached up and took her hand with both of his. "I should have never left you alone." She looked at his face, really looked at it, the way mothers look at their children when they're searching for the person they raised. And what she found made her exhale something she had been holding for a very long time. "I got a letter," she said. "I know. I sent it. I asked him to send it." He paused. "I didn't know how to come myself first. I was afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of what I'd done. Afraid of what I believed." He shook his head. "Someone told me something terrible about you. And I was in such a dark place. I had nothing. I had failed. And instead of coming to you, I believed the lie, and I stayed away." She was quiet for a moment. "Who told you?" "Ekene." Her eyes changed. She knew what Ekene had done. The loan, the forged signature, all of it. She had not known until the letter that he had also poisoned her son's mind against her. Now she knew. She didn't say anything about Ekene. That was a matter for later, for the appropriate people. Right now, in this moment, there was something more important. "I should have called you when I was struggling," Tabena said. "I should have told you the truth. Instead, I was ashamed. And I came back here pretending." He stopped. He tried again. "I came back here pretending to be something I'm not. And I stood at my gate, and I saw your face, and I knew that you would see, through everything. And I couldn't." His voice broke completely. "I couldn't stand to have you see me and find someone who failed." Adeze looked at her son for a long time. "You know what I would have seen? she said finally. He shook his head. My son, she said simply. That's all I ever see when I look at you. That's all I have ever seen. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. The good kind of weight. In the weeks that followed, things happened quickly and slowly at the same time. Tabena found a lawyer and pursued a Ken through the proper channels. The fraudulent loan was exposed, the documents examined, the signature forgery confirmed. The matter of the property was resolved. Adai's house remained hers. Tabena sold the compound on the other side of town. Shallowa, who it turned out had suspected for some time that something painful was behind her husband's silence about his family, did not resist. She had her own quiet strength. She had simply been waiting for her husband to find his way back to himself. They moved into Adai's small house while deciding what came next. Tabena painted the walls. He fixed the gate. He bought back nothing flashy. He cooked in the mornings because his mother needed rest, and because cooking was something he could do with his hands, while his mind worked through everything that had happened. One evening he was at the stove, making the pepper soup his mother had taught him when he was 12, when he heard movement behind him. He turned. She was standing in the doorway, wrapped in her housecoat, looking smaller than he remembered her being. The illness in her chest was real, and it would require attention and time. But her eyes were sharp. Her eyes had always been sharp. You remembered the recipe, she said. I remembered everything you taught me, he said. I just forgot to come back. She came and stood beside him at the stove. She adjusted the heat without asking. She added pepper, the way she always had. Your father used to say, she began, and then paused, the way people pause when they're choosing their words carefully. That the problem with pride is it locks you in a room and tells you the room is the whole world. Tabena stirred the pot. He was right. He usually was. She smiled. Don't tell him I said so. It was the first time they had laughed together since he came back. It was quiet laughter. Careful laughter. The kind that knows it's sitting next to a lot of pain and is being respectful of that. But it was real. The town of Amuna, as towns do, absorbed the story and made it its own. People talked about what Ekene had done. People talked about pride and silence and what 20 years of a lie can cost a family. Some people talked about Tabena harshly because they loved Adaizi and remembered her standing at that gate. Others said that a man who returns and makes it right has done something that many people never manage. Chidinma came to the house one afternoon and sat with Adai's in the yard, while Tabena was out handling the legal matters. So, Chidinma said in her direct way, you forgave him. Adai's thought about this. He's my son, she said. Forgiveness was never in question. The only question was whether he'd come home in time. Chidinma was quiet for a moment. And did he? Adai's looked toward the house where her son would return in the evening, where there was soup on the stove and a door that was never locked. Yes, she said. He came home. If this story moved you even a little, please hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to us. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. There is a particular kind of grief that has no funeral. It's the grief of people who are still alive, but have disappeared from your life. It's the grief of a mother who sets a place at the table that hasn't been needed in years, of a son who picks up his phone to call and then puts it back down because shame is heavier than love on the wrong day. Adai's and Tabena had lived inside that grief for 2 decades, and what cracked it open in the end was not a grand gesture, not the selling of a mansion, not a public apology. It was a letter, and the courage to actually show up, and 2 people choosing to believe what was real over what pride had told them. That choice is always available. The tragedy is how often we wait too long to make it. if you are estranged from someone you love, if there is distance between you and someone who matters, distance built from misunderstanding or shame or someone else's lie, this story is asking you something directly. Is it worth it? Is the silence protecting you? Or has it just become familiar? And if you are the one waiting at the gate, if you are the one who has given everything and received nothing in return, know that your worth was never decided by whether they came back. Know that the act of loving fully and continuing to stand, even alone, is its own kind of answer. Tell me, in the comments below, if you were Adaez, would you have opened the door? And if you were Tobena, could you have found the courage to knock? Family is not about distance. It is about humility. It is about returning. It is about choosing again and again to believe in the person on the other side of the gate. Subscribe to our channel for more timeless stories that remind us what truly matters. And share this one, because someone you know needs it today more than you realize.